What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Leveled Up Life podcast. It's Branamier, Courtney, as always, in the studio with Paul McClain,
My man.
helping people level up their life in all the areas that matter most: faith, family, fitness, finance, franchise. Man, every time I sit in the studio with you, bro, I say it all the time, but I get better and better. I leave more motivated, more encouraged, more on fire, more back in alignment.
Yeah.
Like the world has a way of pulling you out of alignment, like distractions and just so many different areas of life. But every time I sit in the studio with you, man, it's like I'm refocused and re-energized. And that's the heart for everyone watching online is we want you to get back in alignment to whatever God has for you. And so I'm excited to sit down and not only chop it up with you, but we got a special guest on the podcast today. Paul, I'll let you
Yeah.
introduce our guest, but man, glad to be here with
Good
you.
to be here with you, brother. I felt the exact same way. And this is one of those things that it's kind of like a trigger that compartmentalizes and says, okay, this is what I got to focus on. These are the main things this week to go out there and make priority. And how do I level up the most in each one of those areas?
Yep.
And this definitely does it for me. And so, as always, we sit back when we have a guest on, we think like, who's going to provide the most value to you? Our value, our goal is to provide as much value to the guest and those that are blocking out the time to hop on here each and every week. And so, I got to meet Chuck when we were at this change agents meeting. It was a great meeting of high level, thinkers and entrepreneurs and people in the faith, kingdom entrepreneur space. And he was somebody that provided great value to me. We sat along the fire and listened to Chuck share some great stories. But this is a guy that's done some great things. He's our kind of guy, like faith, business,
Yeah.
finances, franchise, all those different things, family guy. And so,
Was
Chuck,
he on the hike with you?
he was not. Wait, I think Chuck, you
Th-
went on the baby hike. I don't think he didn't go on
Oh,
either,
neither.
either hike.
Neither.
Okay,
All right.
no, but he is a guy that I know for a fact can provide so much value. He's already
Yeah.
provided great value to me in one-on-one conversations, and so somebody that's built and scaled massive businesses, works hand in hand with a lot of big thinkers and entrepreneurs and CEOs across the country, and a man of faith that's built and scaled. A big church and has made a big difference, not just in the church, but I would say a guy that makes a big difference in the communities and those that run and have great influence in communities across the country, which is our heart
Yeah.
and desire as well, is not just to build a big church, but to make a massive movement in the communities that we're called to steward and serve. And so, Chuck, man, excited to have you on, man. Thank you for joining us, brother.
Yeah, thank you. I've been excited for this very much. So, and again, like one of these days we'll be in the same room again.
Absolutely. Well,
So,
hopefully sooner than later. And but I want to jump right in. And I know we've got so much time together, and I want to make sure I have as much time spent listening to some of the wisdom and thoughts that you have on some of these questions. And so before we kind of get into, the building and scaling of these different businesses and companies that you acquire, build, scale, and then sell, really love to hear like a little bit about yourself, like prior to the great success, like where was Chuck at? What was the identity that you had, and what was the identity shift that needed to take place for you to step in and be the person that you are today, doing the things that you're currently doing?
well, man, that's actually a good question. That's a good way to ask it too. You've done this before. I I grew up, in a broken family. Both my grandpas left blood relative grandfathers abandoned my parents' family when my parents were young. So when both my parents were in elementary, my mom's dad went to store for bread one day, never came back. My dad's dad went to work one day, never came back. And so the history of my family was that the men left. And my dad, my mom and dad ended up living on the same street, same family history, ended up connecting and got pregnant with me when they were both 17. And what you do at that point in time, you got married, right? You fixed it by marriage. Well, they were divorced by the time I was 6 months old, and then my dad was never around. So the men in my family left. And so part of my identity was actually trying to prove myself to men. And I mean, we could talk all day about the unhealth of that, but that has been kind of my ongoing journey of trying to figure out how do I just be myself? And a couple of things there, like I was born into change. I had a single mom. She got married again when I was one, divorced again when I was five. So my mom was 23 years old, had two kids, and was divorced twice. Brutal start. And so she didn't finish high school. My dad dropped out in eighth grade. So This is like, how do you figure this out? So my life was change all the time. 11 homes, 7 cities before I was a senior in high school. So I was born into change. I learned to navigate change. And we're just moving. You went through life by making decisions and moving on. Like you couldn't stay stuck. And so all that culminated my freshman year in college. I came to faith in Christ, and then started to get surrounded by some people that I could, men particularly, that I could actually look up to and help me develop in my own like just manhood. And my mom, I'm not to take away anything from my mom, of course. Like I learned a lot from my mom, but including how to fight, but not physically, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so in my journey in faith has always been kind of like, how do I just be me and not continually work for the approval of somebody that's not there? And so having to just have my own sense of agency in that and growing into that now at 50 years old, I figured a few things out at least, so along that journey part of that hardwiring is kind of what it's kind of allowing me to be me too. So that was a lot of I don't know if that answers your question directly, but hopefully that's a little bit of understanding of kind of where I came from.
Well, man, I think it definitely does, and I want to say there's probably a lot of people on here that are relating to what
Yeah.
you're talking about, Chuck, that have grown up in a broken home and different things have taken place in their life, and the goal, I think for one that leads people to this survival mindset where I'm just trying to survive and go from here to here and just whatever's thrown out at you, the goal is just to kind of deal with it and survive. And then there's a point in time where somebody steps out of that and becomes more self-aware, and then they take practical steps to really kind of deal with that and use and take that and use it for the betterment and for good, right? It's like scripture says that what the enemy means for evil, God will turn it for good for the saving of many lives. And I feel like, we're best equipped to help our former self. And so I know you've done a lot in that where you've now been able to help people that I'm sure have struggled with the same kind of things and that have held them back. I know when we were in that meeting, I can't remember who, if it was Jason that had said that if you give somebody, if somebody's story is that, they didn't have approval, right? And maybe they're always working for approval from one of the parents. And they grew up in a tough situation. He's like, I can predict where you're at. You're probably very successful and very unhappy. And I think that's a very common thing, which is really what we want to unbunk and really kind of speak to with this podcast and our philosophy, which is like you don't want to be thriving in just business, but then you're depleted in your faith or your family or your health or your fitness is not really where it needs to be because of an identity issue, something you haven't dealt with. How have you practically dealt with those things? I know you talked about mentors. Was it a long process? I know there's probably numerous things, but can you kind of spotlight and maybe highlight a couple things that somebody that's on your saying, hey, I think that's me.
Hmm.
Maybe you can give them some
Yeah.
feedback on how to kind of get out
Well,
underneath that.
yeah, man. I think one of the things is that you have to realize that your past experiences, for better or worse, whatever those were, are your training ground. Like that's your training ground. And there's dysfunction, or there's gifts that are disguised, has been disguised as dysfunction. And that's how I would say it. So like the dysfunction of my life formed me in ways that um similar, like it's formed me just as the positive influences in my life have formed me. And then to change that into like, wow, these can actually be gifts. So for instance, my dysfunction became a gift when I realized that change was home for me. Change freaks people out a lot. It causes fear. But for me, change was home. Like I didn't know anything but change. I knew how to intuitively navigate it. I had a framework to how to navigate that. I went to my stepdad's house one weekend, came home, and I to a different house. I didn't even know we were moving. And
Wow.
people say like, how was that hard on you? No, it actually wasn't. It was normal. It's how we lived. And so what I've realized is although that's a dysfunction, it was also part of my hardwiring that produces a gift. So one of the reasons why I can buy a struggling company now that requires change and turn it around is because I know how to do it. And so when I've been able to connect even the most broken realities of my life to how God has gifted me, then it becomes a new freedom.
Yeah.
And so being able to put those two together has been really, really helpful and freeing for me.
I think for me, as I'm just kind of sitting back and taking it all in, I love to hear stories like this because so many people walk through such moments of difficulty. And when you're going through it, I think for a lot of people, it's hard to see how there's going to be any light at the end of this struggle, at the end of this storm. It's like, yeah, I hear the testimony, but like I'm in it right now. And I said something at church yesterday that I think struck a chord with a lot of people. And it was like the unexpected places, it really becomes the birthplace of God's divine purpose for your life. And I think that's what you're speaking to, Chuck. It's like, man, all these changes, all these times moving, these were unexpected. You didn't expect mom to have, these relationships or move 11 times, but it's like, man, those places became the birthplace of like a divine strategy that God has been using in your life to now be in the marketplace and buy these businesses, and you have eyes to see what others cannot see because you went through these different seasons of life. Maybe talk to about your faith journey a little bit. I know you said you came to faith, I think it was in the ninth grade. Like, talk about what that process looked like. How did you come to faith? Paul mentioned you're a pastor over. Are you in the Northeast? Is that right? Pastor to church in
Nor-
Northwest.
yeah, Northwest in
Northwest. Sorry
Portland.
about that.
Yeah.
Northwest. Like, talk about maybe that journey. Did you feel a call to ministry? Did you grow up thinking I'm going to be a pastor? Like, how did all that come about?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that beginning, what I call is your sovereign foundation, right? You didn't choose to be there, but somehow God was involved in allowing you to have this formation and this foundation.
Yeah.
And then he doesn't waste that. So when you understand that God's with you all the way, in the end, you realize that he never left you. Like, does that make sense? So
Totally.
um, yeah, so I went to church one time in high school, got free pizza and bailed. Like, I didn't want to stay and hear the speech. So like, um, that was my
Shout out
church
to every
experience.
youth pastor.
Totally. Yeah, there was a high school right across, a church right across the street from our high school, and they did something for lunch. But in college, I had this is actually kind of a funny story. So this guy's named Robert. I worked at a grocery store called Safeway, and which is more prominent on the West Coast, I guess. But there's this manager, first year in college, and I had moved out of the house when I was in high school, senior in high school. Um, my mom's boyfriend at the time struggled with alcohol, and we ended up getting a fist fight when my mom was out of town, and I moved out the next day, rented a room for my wrestling coach. And so I was already on my own, but my freshman year in high school or college, sorry, working at Safeway, Robert was one of the managers, and we'd get off work, and he had a wife, three kids, but we get off work at midnight or whatever, and go to someone's house and play cards or whatever we're doing. And he got transferred 6 months later. Didn't see him for 6 months. 6 months later, he just shows up in my check stand at the store, and I was like, Rob, what are you doing? And he's like, man, can you take a break? So I did. We walked outside, and I was excited to catch up to him, but I didn't get a word in. He just started preaching to me.
Mm.
And I listened to this guy for, I don't know, 6, 7 minutes or something. It felt like 6, 7 hours, to be honest, at the time. And I looked at him, and literally what I said is like, Rob, you cracked. Like, I got to go back to work, man. And I just went back in, and I just thought I lost a friend.
Mm.
And a couple weeks later, I go out to my car in the parking lot, and Rob's in the parking lot, and I'm like, this dude's stalking me, man. Like, this is crazy. And he's like, he apologizes, and he asked me, he's like, let's just hang out. You want to come over for dinner one night? And I was like, sure, man. I was like, oh, it was like a relief. So I get to Rob's house, no wife, no kids, no food. He sits down at his kitchen table with a glass of water and a Bible, and he starts preaching to me again. And I was like, no way, man. How do I get out of here? Like, I was like, this is crazy. Well, he starts reading all these passages, and I don't, to this day, I don't really remember all of them that he was reading at all, but I do remember at one point saying, "Hey, I believe that about Jesus." And he goes, "You do?" And I said, "Yeah, but I don't really know what that means." So he begins to walk me through some explanation, leads me through this prayer. And I was like, okay, I don't, I know, I believe that, but I don't know what to do about it. And so I guess I pray this thing. And when I'm leaving his house, um, I said, "Hey man, so are you saying that if I drive home right now and I die in a car accident, I'm going to be with God for all eternity?" And he goes, "No." He goes, "That's what the Bible says, not me." And I drove home without a seatbelt on. No joke.
Mm. Yeah.
I just like it was the craziest, stupidest thing. But for me, it was like, I'm good. And I went home. I was running and up in I had this old Bible and I just started reading it. I opened up the book of Mark and I just started this journey. And so when I started asking all these questions, and then I got to this point, it was like, man, I'm basing my entire eternal destiny in what this book says. I should probably learn about it.
Yeah.
And so I heard about a Bible college 45 minutes away in San Jose, California. And I was up in Castro Valley, California. And I had a friend that was going to move there. And so I just moved. I hadn't even applied to the school. But if you know my history, you didn't just stay put, man. You just moved. Like that was survival. So it wasn't like it sounds crazy when I think about it. I just moved to go to the school and I didn't even apply. But I went to that Bible college just to learn about the Bible. That was it. I was curious about all these things. And then I started volunteering at a church, started interning at the church. I took over the junior high ministry, and then it just kind of kept going. And I ended up planting the church here in Portland in 2008, led that until 2020. Um, and yeah, it's been this whole walking with Jesus thing's kind of crazy sometimes.
I love that. Well, I think it's going to be a great transition into really kind of unpacking and getting into your mind about, what businesses to buy, how to scale them, some of the common things that you see. But before we get into that, I'd love to be able to kind of ask you this, Chuck. Obviously faith has played a massive part in what you've done from this business standpoint, right? And I've always said that I think some of the greatest entrepreneurs in the country are those that are leading churches because it's like you're leading a volunteer army. So you can't really lead from a position, right? You got to lead from relationships. You got to lead from this higher level of respect because of who you are and what you've done for others. And it's just a high level of leadership you got to lead from. But you've taken a lot of this into the marketplace and you've had massive success with the amount of the businesses that you purchased and sold and acquired and what you're doing. If you're going back to like day one, Chuck just getting started, before you've kind of, got into the marketplace, what would be like the biggest leadership principle that you would say that you've led with when it comes to faith that's helped you do what you've done in this marketplace? Like, what's the biggest faith principle that you've utilized and built your businesses from?
Yeah, I say I'm in the business of building up people, and I'm using companies to do it. And in the marketplace, in the secular mindset, you would reverse that. I'm building up companies and I'm using people to do it. And so, from a Christian framework, that has really helped me. It keeps the focus on who, I mean, the only thing we'll take to us with in heaven is, the only thing that'll be there is people. So,
Yeah.
and so that's how I see it.
That's so good.
What a framework.
I know. I almost want to just sit and meditate on that, Chuck, because I think that's such a big, big deal because growing people grow businesses. But oftentimes, well, I guess the question I'd have, Chuck, is like, you know, as you grow a business and somebody that wants to grow and expand and take territory and has got this entrepreneur competitive kind of person, right? I think oftentimes you can have that understanding of it, but then get lost over a period of time and start focusing on really the results and growth of a company. And you don't even realize that you're starting to use the people opposed to using the company to help build the people. Have you seen that play out with different organizations, companies, maybe for yourself? And then what's been the greatest thing that you've done to hedge against that taking place?
Yeah. So building up people doesn't negate like managing a P&L or holding people to it. Like that, it doesn't negate that. In fact, that's just training ground. So the way I think about it is, how do I create mobility, economic mobility for people? Because economic mobility will create social mobility. It doesn't happen the opposite way usually. So it's like, how do I help this person grow? And sometimes that's helping them understand a P&L. Because if that business can't take care of people, then it's backwards. So if that business isn't growing economic or growing people in mobility, well, then I'm going to sell it. I'm out. Like I don't want to do it. And so losing that mindset, that framework helps me stay focused. And so I really enjoy business, but people make it meaningful. And so for me, um, like one of the delivery companies I bought, this is just one example, but I bought a company, all the companies I'm buying are struggling or stagnant at best. And so I bought a company, a delivery company. There was a driver who I kind of liked, and that is one of my strengths, being able to identify people, but and put them in the right spots. But um, made him a supervisor and then a manager, and then he was running the whole company. And then when I sold it to him, but I sold it to him for what I originally bought it for. So I came in, bought it for, quarters on the dollar. I made money along the way. He built economic mobility, and then I sold it to him for what I originally paid for it. So he captures the equity and changes the whole cycle of his life and his family history. He has a history of abuse and neglect and poverty, and now they can switch it. So I made money along the way, but the framework protected me um, from falling into that trap that I think it's really easy to fall into.
Man, that's so good. I absolutely love that. I mean, when you're looking at companies, Chuck, it sounds like, one of the things that you evaluate to determine if you want to, take on and purchase a company is the people that are running the company, right? And what that looks like. What would be, like another two things that you evaluate when coming to this decision of I'm going to purchase this company over maybe another one or making that decision to move forward with them?
Well, from like an investment perspective, I always have to see an opportunity for a person. So if I don't have a person that I feel like this is an opportunity for, I'm not interested. So another way of saying that is like, you know, I don't want to buy a job, so I'm buying a business so someone else has to run it, right? That it's kind of the same end result, but it's a different heart posture. For me, this is a great opportunity for Brandon. That's when I bought Eco Shuttle. This is a great opportunity for Michael, why I bought the in-home care business. Like this is a great opportunity for Tom, which is why I'm buying a manufacturing company. Like I'm looking at the people that way. And so I think I went off your question. What was that? Oh, how I'm buying it. But from a financial perspective, if I'm building up people and using companies to do it, the company has to be viable or I have to see viability in it, an opportunity for it. So I'm looking for a rate of return on investment. If I'm going to pay, X amount for a business, and I don't fix a thing, I need to figure out, okay, what is that rate of return for me so that I can reinvest back in the company. It has to have some viability. So I have some metrics to that. And looking at it, you could look at it from a couple different ways. One is like, well, I could leave that money in the stock market, and maybe make 10 to 14% on it, whatever that number is. Or I could put it over here and make 37% on it if I don't fix anything. So and then I would choose that path all day long because in the stock market, I'm not creating mobility for anybody but potentially myself. So I'll take that money out and I'll put it in an asset that gets a rate of return, but more importantly, it gives the opportunity to invest in somebody and create some economic mobility for someone else. So like, one of my guys, I won't mention his name um, because this is his story, but he spent 4 years, sorry, in prison, um, and fumbled around a ton just trying to find a spot from, you know, uh, you name it, selling used cars to doing some mortgages or whatever. Well, I bought a company, brought him in, and for the first time ever, he was able to buy a house for his family. They're able to take vacations. I mean, he's making great money and he's deserved it, like he's earned it. And so that's what makes it really fun for me. So I could talk for days, so I'll stop.
I love that. I love that. I know that there's this tension of like, and I've seen it quite a bit in the businesses that I run, where it's like you could be so hyper focused on systems, like how do I build more systems, build better systems, and all that is important. Sometimes that negates like the building of people, right? And that balance of the two. How do you balance the two of those, Chuck, when it comes to like building the systems, but also building the people and kind of making that flow well, where it's actually the right balance to grow the organization or grow the business that you're called to grow?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I mean, you could get to about $1 million in revenue with a good idea and a little bit of help. Like that's kind of how it works. I mean, and then to get to about 3 million bucks, you got to really hire some of the right people and delegate some of those things that you've done. So to like duplicate what you've been doing. To get to about 8 million bucks, you got to put systems in place, processes in place. But to get between 8 and 15 million, now you're going to need to bring in some key leaders from outside your organization that have expertise in these areas. And then you're going to have to start automating stuff after that if you want to keep growing. I just don't enjoy over 8 million bucks as much. So in that sense, I'm okay limiting my scale, as I call it, of going, no, I like buying businesses that are maybe doing 500 to 1.5 million dollars that I feel like I can develop people and grow it to about eight. And that's just where I stay. I just stay in my lane. That's how I enjoy it. That's what I enjoy the most. And that's how I keep my framework of I want to build up people and use companies to do it. I like to be more shoulder to shoulder. I have kind of a blue collar, I always say dark blue collar background. Um, and that just kind of stays in my sweet spot. Not to say that I couldn't develop other people if I had a 50 or $100 million company, but it's very different for me. I like to have, more entry level positions to create entry level management and ownership opportunities for people. I'd rather have 12 companies doing $5 million a year than something doing $80 million a year, one thing. And just because it fits me better.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a big tip in itself, is like really knowing what fits you. I think a lot of times somebody's out there trying to be all things to all people, do all
Mhm.
things. And so they can't really do something great because they're not really focused on what do they do great at and what's fulfilling, what actually invigorates you, motivates you. You have passion behind doing, because you're going to do that a lot more with excellence and something different, right? I think that there's quite a few people that watch this that are looking to start a business, and some that I can think of right now that I know tune in that have just started a business, right? They're just new and entrepreneur. A lot of these people working a 9 to 5 job, and they're looking to step in and to do something separate and eventually work their way out of that 9 to 5 job. For somebody that's watching that, you've had a lot of experience in dealing with and working with, a lot of companies that have gotten started, they've kind of plateaued, they've got to this struggling point. What do you believe is like a bad belief that a lot of founders hold on to that keeps them stuck at a low level, or maybe that they eventually develop that puts them and lands them in a place of struggle or just stagnation?
Well, one of the common mistakes is you feel like if you just work harder, it'll work. And I would always say hustle is less than clarity. Clarity is greater than hustle. So, like providing clarity, providing lanes of operation. I have my framework. I think we maybe talked about this a little bit, but it's in, on, and for. You either work in the business, on the business, or for the business, and creating clear lanes and creating capacity versus hustle in people. And so, I think the best leaders can have a good idea for sure, but they're able to scale with their company. And the truth is sometimes an organization will grow past people, right? But sometimes the organization grows past the owner. And so like that person has to be able to adjust too. And so anyways, I think that every leader has to understand that you bottleneck your organization somehow. The question is do you know how and can you navigate that? So a lot of guys are stuck because they feel like hustle's greater than clarity. And so clarity of lanes that people run in, um, clarity of what people are doing and why, all those kinds of things. So that could be a 2 hour conversation, but
Yeah, I mean, it's like I've always said that either you're thinking too much and doing too little, or doing too much and thinking too little. Both of those land you in a position of being stuck. But I think as a new founder, I've often found my time, found myself just really trying to go out there and outwork it and out hustle that thing.
mm,
To just pausing and saying, well, what can I tweak? What can I adjust? What can I modify? What should I be thinking about? And that always leads you in a position of really frustration because you're like, man, I'm moving, I'm hustling, I'm working, and it's not growing. And I feel like that's the breeding ground for disappointment is you're giving all this effort and you look up and there's no progression. There's no progression because you're not thinking. There's no clarity in actually what you're working on. So you're running down this path, busting up your legs, tripping up, falling down because you're not looking at the hazards that are, easily in front of you. And so I think that's such a powerful point for all those founders is yes, you want to work hard, but don't miss the moments of pause and reflection time that you should intentionally build out in your schedule where it'll help you gain clarity and evaluate the experience so that way when you move forward, you've got insight to work harder, but also better. And so I absolutely love that. I was going to ask you the question about, what does a kingdom exit look like? But I believe you've answered that with what you talked about and that example you gave with making the money along the way and then selling it back. But I think that's a great example for somebody that I want to know, maybe selfishly, and maybe somebody else can take and use this as value for them. But when do you know it's the right time to exit a company? I've had an exit before, right? And looking back, I can now in hindsight probably analyze if it was the right time or the wrong time. But how do you know it's the best time, right? It's kind of like a stock. Like you never know when's the best time. You just in hindsight, man, I made a good decision, right? Or I made a bad decision. Is there signals or signs to know like when somebody should be preparing and are now in a position to exit a company?
yeah, yeah. So for me, for instance, probably three things that came to mind right as you're saying that. One is that if it no longer fits your framework. So I shared mine. Like I want to grow companies from, up to about 8 million bucks. If it's and I've grown them past that, but then I sold it because I'm just not enjoying it as much. So it went outside of my framework, then I'm good. Um, the second thing would be when the person behind you, when there's somebody to that is ready, that's when you get out. So like a lot of owners wait till they're done, wait till they're ready to move on. I forget who said it. I didn't come up with this, by the way, just to be clear. I just can't remember who said it. But it's basically said, when it's time to move on when the person behind you is ready to step in, not when you're ready to leave. I'm sorry. And then maybe another area to consider is if you don't know where you're going next, it's time. Like on a bell curve of an organization, if you can't continue to give it another hoop, loop up, another kind of hockey stick movement, you don't know what's next. You need to sell and get out. You're just stagnant, and that's probably for any man stagnant is not good. But I think that's when you know that the organization needs a fresh vision.
Yeah, that's great. It almost makes me think about like Elijah and Elisha, like having enough,
Yeah.
like just not having the ego get in the way from saying like, hey, this is the order to which I need to make that transition. And at the end of the day, it's like a paradox. What you think isn't. You're probably a lot more gratified and fulfilled seeing that take place than when you feel like, okay, this is now the time for me to leave, and maybe you've missed it, right? And
Yeah, because it's like, it's like in the church world, it was like, oh, I think Marcus is ready for this. I should probably get out of his way. That's very different than I don't know what I'm going to do and everybody else has to work around me. you know I think it's like when the next person's ready to step in, that's your sign. Or if you're lost vision, you can't, you go through seasons as a leader where you have to like, I'm not really sure what's next. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about sustained pattern of like, I just don't know what's next. I can't motivate these people. Those kinds of things of like, yeah, it's just probably time to move on.
I love that. Well, a lot of the talk that we have and things that we unpack is like disciplines, right? I believe discipline will lead to freedom in a lot of different areas. And maybe somebody's one discipline away from having a great breakthrough in an area of their life that they're looking for a breakthrough in. What do you think, Chuck, is like one of the biggest or main disciplines that a young entrepreneur could cultivate and develop that's going to make the biggest difference in their business that they're leading?
Well, I think the discipline of knowing who you are matters. I mean, the worst thing is to be the right person in the wrong lane. And I mean, just knowing who you are and how you operate is absolutely critical. And so like I think just the discipline of self-awareness probably is probably key. And for me, that starts with I almost said every morning, and it doesn't happen every morning. So, but most mornings, um, sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 30 minutes. But I like to just open up and just say, Lord, I just want to recognize you, and I'm grateful that you recognize me. And then you just sit in it. And there's a grounding that occurs when I'm trying to recognize and acknowledge God for who he is, and then understanding that he's actually acknowledging who I am today, right now. He knows who I am. And there's a grounding to that that helps me move through the day. So that's another just practical discipline that I have too. Like centering yourself on who God is and who you are allows you to like have the discipline of knowing your lane later.
Man, that's powerful. And I feel like Chuck, I've witnessed for myself seasons of me being a good steward of that discipline, and then seasons where I'm not. And for me, if I look back, it's like when I'm most overwhelmed and I feel like my energy is depleted, it's usually when I've not done that, when I've not
Mm,
spent that time just saying,
yeah.
like, search me, Lord, like know my anxious thoughts, like, and just kind of that grounding and oneness with God. Because I feel like anxiety is a great separator. But oftentimes, if we don't spend that time, when I haven't spent that time just deliberately saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do when I first wake up, then I feel like I move through the day with more stress, anxiety, and being overwhelmed. And so I'm going into the meeting, I'm going into the Zoom, I'm going into that next conversation without the presence of God because anxiety separates me from him. But if you could develop that oneness early in the morning, well, now I have peace more as I go through things, and I'm more likely to stay in the lane that God really wants me to operate in because it's a gifting. It's where He wants me to make the greatest impact for Him. And so I love that. As you're saying that, I'm reflecting about like my daily routine and how oftentimes if I'm really busy or things get put on my plate, that's when I need it the most. And that's usually when I do it the least because I got just stuff to do, right? And so really being, I guess, aware of that's important. Um, you got a question? About
I just feel like
you've
no,
never been
I'm
this
good.
quiet. I don't know what you're.
No, I just feel like I'm sitting in the middle of two giants speaking, so I don't want to interrupt because as a founder of a company and also a pastor of a church, I'm just like analyzing every area of my life and thinking I got work to do, you know. And as Chuck is speaking about framework and how he evaluates businesses and how he thinks about things, and I'm thinking about my janitorial company and going, all right, Chuck, maybe we need to have a conversation about, where I'm at because you said something that sparked it, just a thought to me that anyone could have a great idea and get it about $2 million. But above that, you got to start bringing systems in and the right people in. And I think I've gotten to a point in my business where it's a great idea and I've ran it for a long time, but I also have this other giant called the church that I'm running. So I'm just sitting back analyzing the two different lanes that I'm running in. And I love what you said um, just last about having the right identity and knowing who you are. And as I'm thinking about after Jesus was baptized, like the first thing God said to him is, "This is my son in whom I'm well pleased." And what was he doing in that moment? He was speaking identity over him. Because we can get, I think there's something, and maybe you could relate to this, Chuck, called an imposter syndrome, where
Mhm.
you feel like, man, I don't. I don't know if I'm the right person to be running this company or leading this church. But when we can continue to stay grounded each and every day, going, no, this is what God has for me. This is who God called me to be. I am a child of God. I am chosen and all the things, right? But it's like what you said, Paul, not allowing the stress or the anxiety or the fears of life to separate you from that oneness with God. So I'm just taking it all back. You're right, I haven't been this quiet, but like I said, I'm not going to interrupt wisdom when it's speaking.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's no question that that shows that there's a great amount of value because I've been stuck in that situation where it's just like I want to just
Yeah.
making notes, I'm taking mental notes and I'm making notes like on what I'm actually
Yeah.
learning, like reflecting on my life. And I feel like this has been one of those podcasts for sure. Whereas people are taking notes, they're also making notes and saying, okay, how does this apply to me? How can I get better at this? Where's the applicability? How on a one to 10, where am I at with this? And I think that's ultimately the desire and goal is not just to have people inspired,
Yeah.
but to leave and actually have some heightened awareness and then some practical steps to get to the next level in their life. Chuck, as we wrap up, one of the last questions I want to ask you is, if you were speaking to just all the entrepreneurs in the world and you had a megaphone and I gave it to you and said, hey, what would you say to them? What would be the advice you'd give them? What would be the one biggest tip or takeaway you'd give them? What would you say? And maybe it's not that, like, what would you tell them if you were speaking to a world of just all the entrepreneurs out there? What would you say?
I'd probably just say stay in your lane. Like, I mean, you know, it's the self-awareness piece. So again, for me, people like think I'm like schizophrenic because I'm like industry agnostic. Like I have all different commercial mechanics, transportation, home care, I mean, whatever it is. Um, People are like, what is that? Well, actually, I'm actually just doing the same thing. And it's part of who I am. Like, first of all, I'm super curious person. So that means I also get bored quick. Like you can't have both. Like it's gonna happen. And then I know I'm just really good at change and transition. I can fix things. I can navigate change, and I can galvanize things. So teams and people and systems. And so I'm just staying in my lane. So I'm not gonna really buy a company that's like cash flowing strong and doesn't need change. I'm gonna be out of my lane. It's not what I'm best at. I'm not a good manager. I'm good at change and I'm good at empowering people and efficiencies. So your core competencies determine your lane. And so if you don't know what your core competencies are, like efficiency for me, like this is like pretty crazy, but and you might even say I'm anal on this because of this, I should say. But efficiency is a core competency. I think about efficiency all the time. I even when I squeegee my shower, I squeegee from one side to the next because where I end up is where I hang up the squeegee. Like I'm not going to go the opposite direction. So that's a core competency for me. So the thing is how do you go from pastoring to buying a delivery company? Well, it's actually the same core competency. You have some efficiencies and you have people and you have some admin stuff. Like it's not crazy. So if you know your core competencies, know who you are, and then stay in your lane.
I love that. For somebody that's watching this and they're saying, I'm struggling though identifying what my core competencies are.
Yeah.
Is there a tool, a test, a thing, something that they could do to help them identify maybe what their core competencies are so they can help build that lane that you're talking about?
Yeah, so I think a couple things maybe come to mind. One is know what time frame you think in. So, like, are you constantly thinking about what's next? Are you constantly thinking about what's today? Are you constantly thinking about, how do you fix problems? That's going to tell you your lane. So, in my framework, in, on, and for, the people working in the business got to be thinking about tasks and have tenacity and how do I get this done fast? People on the business are thinking strategy, like, how do I think through things? How do I make things better? And then if you're for the business, you're thinking much more future tense. You think in quarters and years, not days or months. And so how do you think? And then secondly, like time frame, but secondly is what do you think about? So do you do naturally? Like, are you naturally efficiency? Like I am, like I can think through how to get somewhere the quickest way, or are you somebody that's like, I don't know, it's just six of one, half dozen of another. You can go this way, it might take, it doesn't really matter. Or what? So what time frame, and then what do you think about are two ways to kind of help you see kind of what lane you fit in.
That's so good. I love that. Well, Chuck, man, this has been so good for me, Brandon. I don't know if you have
No, I'm
any
just, yeah, I'm
other
just
question,
taking it all in.
but man, I appreciate you hopping on, man, spending the time together with us. This has been really, really good for me. I mean, I've got some great notes that I'm gonna leave here, and I got 7 minutes before my next meeting. I'm gonna pause and I'm gonna think, and I'm gonna reflect, and I want to make sure I go into that with a heightened awareness of who I am and what I'm called to do within that, man. And I think this is something that for everybody on here today, it should be a great reminder of, man, knowing yourself and self-mastering and understanding and awareness of you. It's so important. Without it, it's not just harmful for you. It's not harmful for others. It's not just frustrating for you. But when you get it right, man, that's where you can make the real impact, and you can also live from a state of fulfillment and happiness and joy. It's a lot of times it's working in the purpose and calling that we've got, but I think the enemy wants to keep us from that, and distort our reality, distort who we are, and cause doubt and disbelief in really the purpose and calling that we've got. But it takes us to pause and be aware and be in prayer to identify that. And once we have it, write it down, and then run with it. And so, Chuck, you've done that for me today, man. I want to just say thank you again for joining. And man, what a podcast! I really appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Appreciate it, man. And prayed for your daughter a number of times, and prayed for you as you tried to parent her too. And so I'm grateful for the time too. I look forward to more conversations with you guys.
I do as well, my friend. All
Thanks,
right,
Chuck.
guys. Well, hey, make it a massive week. Be strong, stay steadfast, and we'll talk to you next week. God bless you guys. Take care. Bye bye.